I remember my platoon sergeant was quite frustrated with me, and he goes, "Kerns, how come every time I ask you a question, you have to have an answer?" And I didn't understand that. I was like, well, because you asked me a question, like it seems it's my duty to give you an answer. And he goes, yeah, but you always have to explain yourself. You can never just admit you're wrong. It's always had to be some reason or something happened. You thought you made the best decision at the time. Like, that's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you to be accountable. Say you messed up and say you're not going to do it again. And boy, did I really need that. And I think that was an incredible lifelong lesson.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Path Found, the podcast about the real, messy, unexpected journeys that lead us to the work we love. I'm Monica Argandonia, and every week I talk with someone whose story proves there's no single right way to build a meaningful life. What does it take to go from dropping out of high school, selling weed to afford Subway, to getting a phone call from Harvard Law School offering him admission and asking them in genuine disbelief, "Are you sure?" Today's guest is Stephen Kerns, a Deputy Attorney General at the California Department of Justice, an adjunct professor at Cal State Long Beach, and someone whose path has been anything but straight. He grew up in Long Beach, joined the Army Infantry at 19, and deployed to one of the most dangerous corners of Afghanistan in 2007. He came home, earned his degree in environmental science, cold emailed a researcher who rejected him, and got a life-changing yes. Then he went to Harvard Law. Stephen talks about what the military actually taught him, and it wasn't what he expected. He talks about accountability, romantic idealism, the carbon budget he thinks about every day, and why he now believes imposter syndrome is a green light, not a stop sign. He also has something to say about following up and about being kinder. This one's worth the listen. Stephen, I'm so happy to have you as a guest. I've known you for quite a while now and really interested in getting into your story. So as I start with everybody, give us a little bit of background. What were you like growing up? Where'd you grow up? What were you like as a student?
Everything I am saying today in every context is my personal opinion and in no way related to the opinions of the office. I'm speaking in my behalf as a person, on my behalf as an attorney at the California Department of Justice. Yeah, so interestingly enough, I was a high school dropout. So I grew up in Long Beach. I joked that I was raised by wolves. So learned how to fend for myself fairly early on, had like a kind of fierce independent streak. Sometime around 7th grade, my parents split, and I went from like very focused academically to like, I don't care. So I became a terrible student in like the span of a semester. And when it came to high school, I remember I had this big chip on my shoulder because I would do really well on tests, but I would do very poorly in class because I refused to do any kind of project or homework or anything like that. And my perspective at the time was like kind of cutting off your nose to spite your face, but you're a teenager, so you think you know everything. And so I had this view that if school exists for me to understand knowledge and I can show that I know the knowledge because I do well on the tests, like the rest of it is theater. Why do I need to do this? And I didn't have the foresight to be like, okay, it's to get you to practice and build discipline. I pretty much dropped out of spite at that point. I was like, this is a BS system. I don't agree with education. And then joined the Army, which I'll put a pin in that. So it took me quite some time to learn how to be a good student again. So when I got out of the Army, I started at Long Beach City College. And I remember I got out of the Army on Friday, started City College on Monday, and was like borderline having a panic attack that Sunday night. Because I was like, oh my God, like this is going to be like college. People are going to be in like the quads quoting Shakespeare like cold, and it's going to be like incredible intellectual superpowers, in which, I was in the Army for the last 4.5 years. I'm not equipped for this. And then I got there and I realized I had built the discipline and the practice that I refused to engage with as a high school student in the Army. And so it was really easy for me to take like my ability to retain information and my curiosity, couple that with the discipline and the habits I built in the military, and actually become a very good student.
Okay, so I'm going to go back a little bit. How old were you when you dropped out of high school?
17, I dropped out. I started working at Mimi's Cafe in Lake Forest, and I was living with like a whole bunch of people I had met over the internet, which was like, at the time, bizarre, but, now it seems kind of quaint. Yeah, and it was kind of like a real world Kafka-esque situation. I was like sharing a room with a girl named Melissa. There was 2 couples in the house. It was a 3-bedroom house, 2 bathrooms. There were 6 people in it. It was crazy. I was 17. I was selling weed on the side so I could afford to eat at Subway occasionally and relying on the family meal that you get at restaurants. So I was scraping by, but it was wonderful. But yeah, it was an interesting way to do senior year, as it were.
So how did you decide to go to the Army?
I had always admired the military, and I, especially when I was younger, was very prone to romantic thinking and grand notions. So I was like, I want to make something of myself. I'm certainly not doing it right now. And I think there's something elemental to understanding the martial spirit and what it is to engage in warfare, which was the romantic part. And so I kind of took stock of my life. I decided I didn't want to be where I was going. I was like, this is as good a time as any. So I walked to the recruiter's office, which was probably a 7-mile walk. So I felt pretty committed. And I walked in and I was like, look, I want to join the infantry. What do I have to do? The rest was history after that.
So how long were you in the Army?
Oh, I think 4-ish years, 4.5, something like that.
So can you talk about that experience? Was it what you thought? What did you get out of it?
Great question. I feel like I don't want to say everything, but I got most of, I think, my present identity from the military. So I went in a mix of arrogant, which I feel like the counterbalance to arrogance is a sense of kind of wimpiness or cowardice. I feel like if you're being arrogant, you're usually compensating for something. So I was definitely that. I had this stylized view of myself where I was super smart and blah, 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 blah. And, society is wrong, kind of like a Holden Caulfield from Catcher in the Rye kind of perspective, right? Peak 18-year-old. And so I started on right after my 19th birthday, started boot camp, and it was challenging, but it wasn't quite this soul grinding experience that I expected at first. I was like, oh man, if this is the best you can do, it's not that crazy, right? I got really lucky from boot camp and I got stationed in Italy with an elite airborne unit called the 173rd. And I got there and it was incredible. I was 19. They were like, well, we can't stop you guys from drinking. You're in Italy. It's legal here. So it felt like kind of making up for the college years I wasn't getting in the sense of hey, drink party. But it was interesting, and there's a book written about it called The Chosen Few, which was the name of my company. Our company is about 110 guys in the infantry. The author of that book, Greg Zorora, described it as a company of lost boys. So I was very much fitting in that regard. While it was challenging, I still felt like I was able to physically give more, but it really was the place where I learned how to cabin and curtail my arrogance and really think about, okay, I don't know everything and I really need to shut up and listen. I'm glossing over how much effort that took, and my squad leader and my platoon sergeant really were legendary in that. But yeah, I remember my platoon sergeant was quite frustrated with me. I was, doing push-ups. He was yelling at me and he goes, Kerns, how come every time I ask you a question, you have to have an answer? And I didn't understand that. I was like, well, because you asked me a question, it seems it's my duty to give you an answer. And he goes, yeah, but you always have to explain yourself. You can never just admit you're wrong. It's always had to be some reason or something happened or, you thought you made the best decision at the time. That's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you to be accountable. Say you messed up and say you're not going to do it again. And boy, did I really need that beaten into me. And I think that was an incredible lifelong lesson. That was well timed because that's about the time we deployed to Afghanistan. And, setting context here, this is 2007. We had actually been trained to go to Iraq. Iraq at the time was a hot zone. It was not where you wanted to be. And Afghanistan, by contrast, seemed relatively peaceful as far as things go. We deployed to northeastern Afghanistan in a province called Nuristan, which a lay perspective that I'm bringing to this seemed kind of like the West Virginia or the rural Florida of Afghanistan. Our Afghan National Army partners kind of explained to us it was a punishment to be stationed there for them. So we're talking incredibly rural. It looked like you were stuck in a shark's tooth of mountains. And if the Roman Legion walked by, it would be a technological improvement for the day-to-day life of the Afghans. It ultimately became that we were on on the tip of the spear defensively, tip of the spear of the resurgent Taliban that came pouring over the border from Pakistan. And it really became, and I think the correct word would be historic, but rough deployment. Two of the guys in my 110-man company received the Medal of Honor and are still alive to talk about it. In our 800-person battalion, we had a third Medal of Honor, still alive to talk about it. So just to kind of nutshell, it was extreme. And so the romanticism that I had in youth of like, oh, I want to understand like the martial spirit, that cup ranneth over. Like, I understood it, but I also understood the ugly parts of warfare that, like, if you read history, they really describe in detail the banality of it, the meaninglessness of it, the horrificness of it. And so that part came with it, and it was a really bitter cocktail, right? That said, if the perspective it gave me, the amount of gratitude it gave me, the focus, the purpose it gave me, I wouldn't trade that for anything. Like, you could offer me, to be 20 years younger or, 30 years further in my head or a career, $1 billion, whatever. I wouldn't trade that perspective, because that really kind of became the nucleus in which my life was in valence around, right? Clarity of purpose, a strong sense of discipline and teamwork, and the long-lasting view of how fleeting life can be. And like, you really need to go after it, right? Later in life, I was challenged to come up with a life mantra, and I came up with earn tomorrow, because really, like, you don't know what's going to happen. And like, the worst days of your life are some random Tuesday you didn't have plans for, right? Like, it's not like, oh, I had this arc of my life planned out and I just didn't do it, or I didn't get the job I wanted. The real defining moments are these random Tuesdays that kind of just blindside you. So, I dreamt of going to special forces. A lot of my friends did. And I really respect that they had the commitment. But at that point, I was like, you know what? We've lost enough guys. I've seen enough violence. I'm good. And then I had already developed, guess it's from burn pits, this is my lay medical opinion, but I had started developing a really bad asthma and like lifelong allergic conditions, which plagued me still. So those things together, I was like, okay, cool. Got out of the Army. And yeah, that brought me to Long Beach City College, which is taking a pin out of the story I'd mentioned earlier.
So you were there 4 years, you come back. Did you know right away, I'm going back to school?
Yeah. So, I watched a lot of my friends graduate. I had stayed, and I think this really helped me with post-traumatic stress, which, it can either go into like the disorder category or post-traumatic growth category. And I think the fork in the road for me was actually that I stayed really close to my friends from home. So I had like an identity to come back to. And many of them, if not most of them, had gone on to become like engineers and scientists, right? And I always really liked science. And my first semester of Long Beach City College, I took an environmental science class. And I was like, oh, wow, it's actually quite bad out there. Like, I had like a loose understanding of climate change and, environmental degradation, but like, woof, it's tough. And seeing it quantified even back in 2010 was enough. I was like, oh, wow. So that felt like a sense of purpose. I was like, my community's given me so much. I really felt that like the saving grace from being raised by rules was I had a really tight circle of friends. So I felt like they'd given me much and I wanted to continue giving them something. So I was like, I'll go fight climate change. This seems like the great battle of our generation. Why not? So really started to get into that, which I think also with the fact that I had PTSD and was like really struggling with it at the time, like the catastrophic nature of what climate change could be kind of really paired well with my need to catastrophize. Yeah, that was pretty much that. I was like, okay, I'm going to be an environmental scientist and eventually, explore multiple avenues of that, but we'll get there. But that was the transition out of the Army into where I'm at now, as it were.
So then you go to Cal State Long Beach, you major in environmental science and policy.
Correct.
Being at Long Beach, how did you make the most of that? Well, like, what did you do while you were there?
So a lot of my friends went to Cal State Long Beach and I grew up in Long Beach. So I really thought that was like the pinnacle of education. I was like, oh my God, like I got into Cal State Long Beach. I'm really stoked. This is 2 years after I thought people were quoting Shakespeare in the quad. So I was like, I have to make the most of this. And it felt serious in a way that LBCC didn't, by virtue of it was a commuter school and everyone was there generally to go somewhere else. And so myself included, when I got to Cal State Long Beach, I was like, I am here. Like, this is it. And so I took it very seriously while I was there. while I was not at school, and I had the benefit of the GI Bill, so I didn't really have to worry about, like maintaining like a part-time job. I had one, but it wasn't like this is how I had to eat. So I had the luxury of also making sure my social cup stayed filled, which I think actually was equally important because it gave me a lot of opportunity to blow off steam and remain balanced, which led me to stay very focused on academics. So I remember one of the readout classes for our major was biostats. And so there'd be times I'd wake up, I'm not a morning person, so despite the military. So what I'm saying, like, really is a display of commitment. I would wake up like 6:30 in the morning, bike to school. So I'd get the endorphins going, have a cup of coffee, and I would just sit there and read my biostats book. And I was like, okay, I got to practice. I got to do this. Like, if this is the weed out class, like, I have to commit. You and the program especially would put out these opportunities that were pretty phenomenal, but seemed like a stretch. One of them was one that I received. It was called a research experience for undergrads. A wonderful program that the National Science Foundation did as a series of grants. I hope they still do it. But basically, they would team up postgrad or PhD researchers with undergrads who were interested in becoming research scientists to be like, hey, like, let's have a sampling of this. And some of them, like, you had to be scuba certified, but you do like reef research in the Bahamas, and you get paid for this, and it's lovely. It's a great way to spend a summer. I got one in Costa Rica where we did rainforest research on medicinal plant species to help preserve their use. And I actually was rejected initially. And this is a kind of bottled lightning, I got lucky moment, but I followed up and I was just like, hey, understand that I got rejected, but I'm grateful you reviewed my application. What could I do better? I just want to keep at this, and I wanted take learning experiences when I can get them. The woman who was the head of that specific grant was a wonderful mentor of mine named Daniela Shevitz. She's I should say Dr. Daniela Shevitz. She's an ethnobotanist, and she, I guess, was at a conference and just happened to pull up her phone at that time, was reading emails, had a bunch of them, picked that one. I was like, oh, wow, that's a really nice email. And read my application. She was like, we need to get this guy. I don't know who screened in, but I think we should get this guy. Had it not been for the polite follow-up, that would have changed the arc of my life, because that gave me research momentum to apply to more difficult science programs. And let me be specific. I later used that momentum to apply for a NASA Jet Propulsion Lab program where you did remote sensing, which was great because the ESP, or Environmental Science and Policy Department at Cal State Long Beach, was really close to the geography department. So I was able to kind of carve out a later academic focus on remote sensing. But I wouldn't have been the competitive applicant had I not done that, and I wouldn't have gotten that had I not sent that email. So it really reminded me the importance, and I've used this lesson throughout my life. Professionals are busy. Politeness goes a long way, and it's okay to be like, hey, look, sometimes your inbox is buried. I get it. Mine gets buried too. But to follow up and just be polite, show that you actually really care about this, and be thoughtful in your pursuit of it. And, sometimes not taking no for an answer when it comes to a professional opportunity can be to your benefit. And I think that works both ways. I now mentor a lot of people, and I really like when people follow up. And sometimes I'll tell them hey, I'm really busy right now, but I'm just noting, hit me up next week. If you haven't heard from me by Tuesday, follow up. Right. So yeah, all is to say that experience from Cal State Long Beach taught me that lesson. It taught me the value of momentum, the value of, politely not taking no for an answer sometimes when it comes to professional opportunities, and also the inverse of what I think a lot of college kids do. Part of that's their age. I happen to be in the military at the college, the 18 to 22 year mark, but inverting the, hey, I'm here to study and I will socialize to help that, versus I'm here to socialize and I'll study because that's what I'm here to do. And so I think that group of lessons was how I really succeeded at Cal State Long Beach.
Where did you pick that up to know to follow up? I always tell people after they do an interview, always send a thank you. It's so easy and quick and just takes a few minutes, and it goes a long way. But where did you learn to do that?
I don't know exactly when I learned it, but I'm pretty sure it came from an office hours. And one of the benefits I had starting college a little bit later, again, all my friends have already graduated and were fresh. I was like, guys, you just finished senior year. I'm just starting. What do you wish you had done? And they're like, oh my God, go to office hours. You can go to office hours all the time. You're going to want letters of recommendation later. Sometimes, professors, if they're having a problem on an academic topic, They might be great at mentoring you, and they might also sometimes like give you a little insight into what the exam might be looking like. So like, being unafraid, and I think being like, okay, cool, my friends told me that, now I can go to office hours and I feel more comfortable talking to professors. Professors are telling me like they like when people do this, and I'm like, well, I have no reason to count you. And I'm pretty sure I picked up the like thank you after interview, be politely insistent idea from those office hours.
So, this is audio, but just a visual here. I am adamantly agreeing with you, shaking my head that yes, office hours. Go to office hours. All right. So you graduate. Do you know what you want to do?
Yeah. So I, at the time, decided I wanted to go to law school for sure around senior year, close to graduation. And what led me to that was actually that research experience to undergrad was kind of like the final, like, hey, this is really confirming this. We had a guy, Bill. Bill was awesome, really like Bill. So we're sitting in the jungle or the rainforest, and we're smoking cigars, drinking some bourbon. At the very end of like the research experience, it was a nice, like, nightcap kind of situation. And I'm asking him what it's like at the NSF, because I still had this kind of science as religion view where like, these are modern day priests, they're preaching the truth, this is fantastic. And he hit me with a bit of real world experience that made me a little cynical. And he goes, yeah, the NSF does a lot of wonderful things, but at the same time, sometimes when you're looking at grants, it's not the merits of the grant. It's just that we're talking before with each other about who's going to get what, and you're worried about giving your presentation. So you're not really paying attention to someone else's presentation to get all the nuance because you're prepping for your presentation. And it kind of pulled back the veil of science isn't perfect, not because the scientific method itself is flawed. It's the best thing we have, but because it is laden with the messiness of humanity, as is every other industry, but I didn't have that sight yet. And I was like, oh, wow, science is still human. Okay. And I had this concern that, hey, look, climate change, my willingness to catastrophize thing in the background, we have a limited time to do stuff with urgency. I was really afraid that if I became a research scientist, a lot of my thoughts would go into like the good idea binder, as I called it. It was like, oh man, that's a really good idea. And, policymakers were applauding that you guys did the work great. And then they'd put it on the good idea binder shelf with all the other good ideas that are collecting dust, and it wouldn't get done. And I didn't want that. And I was really, and I still do, I try and measure my professional endeavors by what impact I think they're having, because I'm like, look, we got to move the needle. And so I was nervous that I might be screaming into the academic hallways where everyone's like, we know. And so I didn't want to do that as much as I really liked being a scientist or, moving in that direction. I can say I had officially become one. Again, prone to romantic thinking. I was like, oh my God, I should take what I know about science and go into the law so I can try and remove some of these policy, bureaucratic, and political roadblocks. Because I didn't feel like if I yelled about environmental science to environmental lawyers, they would be like, I know. They'd be like, that's actually really helpful. So I, pursued law school with that notion, which again, much like the military, started off was romantic and it was inspirational, and then kind of became tempered by the reality of the situation, putting a pin in that as well. So that was kind of my thinking there. And then my final semester of undergrad, I was probably like most undergrads, burning the candle from both ends, and was studying for the LSAT, finishing out that NASA thing, doing all this. So it was go, sprint to graduation, took the LSAT, didn't score as well as I wanted to, but so it goes. And then applied to law school and took a job at AmeriCorps, which financially hurt, spiritually and wonderfully fulfilling, and taught me a lot about California water management, which incredibly rewarding experience intellectually. But I say all that because I remember graduating, I was like, I don't want to pull the rug under anybody in the environmental field, because I was like, look, like we're all in this together. We need to be as good actors as we can to each other. And I don't want to be a tourist and say, hey, I'm here for a year. By the way, sorry, you're a pit stop. And I didn't think that was a great way to start career. So I was like, oh, AmeriCorps is a 1-year program. Everybody's a winner here. I served for a year. They get good service. I continue my view of public service. Like there was no drawbacks. So then I think I got paid like 17 grand,
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't see me, but I'm saluting to any and everyone who's ever done AmeriCorps. You're the salt of the earth. So yeah. And then I had the good fortune of being accepted into Harvard for law school, which was, okay, so again, I dropped out of high school. So I remember they called me. First I got the interview and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I took it at my office in AmeriCorps. They stationed us at various water utilities. I was a water fellow. So I was at the Inland Empire Utility Agency where I learned a lot. Wonderful place to work. Shout out to them. They do good stuff. But I had like this water systems map behind me and I was like, okay, like I'm going full bore. I was wearing my little NASA hoodie and I was like, okay, like I got to do the best that I can and signal every little thing I can to put like, what, death by 1,000 cuts, like, let's go. So interviewed, I thought I did pretty well. I wasn't sure. It was like, okay, this is fine. And yeah, they called me and they told me that I had been accepted. And I think if I recall correctly, I went, are you sure? Like, really? And they're like, yeah. So did a double take. And then I'll say like, one of the hardest decisions of my life actually was choosing between going to Harvard and leaving everything I knew behind. And I had a well-established life. At the time I had a serious relationship. I'd, been gone for a long time, but I was like finally enmeshed back with my friends from home, which was, pivotal, as I said earlier, for me going not down PTSD land, but post-traumatic growth path. And so really felt rooted, or I could go to UCLA, and UCLA has a phenomenal environmental law program, phenomenal professors. I had worked with one of them while on AmeriCorps and really admired them. So that was a really tough decision, but I received a lot of counsel. And while I don't agree with this paradigm, it seems here to stay, at least for the near future. And I'd already learned enough about cutting off my nose to spite my face. So everyone I knew who'd been a lawyer was like, dude, just go to Harvard, man. Like you choose the best law school you get into, whether you like it or not. Like that's just kind of the advice I was given. And it was uniform. And I was, hey, when I was in office hours, professors told me to do X. And I'm like, you're further along. I have no reason to doubt you. So I was like, okay, X it is.
So you're there. You're at Harvard. Is law school what you think it is? I know it hits into COVID time now too, right?
So I finished law school my last semester in COVID, as COVID starting. So like the Tiger King era was like my closeout of law school.
Okay. So
I had in undergrad, as part of that socializing, my friends and I really loved music. A lot of my friends who I grew up with were musicians. And so we, as like a passion project, worked in like the nightlife and the music festival world. And a lot of my friends still are there professionally. And it was a lot of fun, but it was like a silly kind of place relative to the law. So, I was having like the time of my life. I felt really balanced. And then I get to law school, right? And you did this thing called Admitted Students Weekend. It had a lot of places that you could admit to. And the school tries to woo you and you meet some of your future colleagues. I liked everyone I met. I was like, okay, this is green light, green light, green light. And I remember the first week of law school, a few things happened. One, I remember people from the law school saying, hey, like, you're going to meet some of your lifelong best friends here. And I was like, I don't know, man, I'm 30. I've already got lifelong best friends. I don't know if that's going to happen. I probably have never been more wrong socially in my life. Some of the most wonderful people I've ever met in my life were at law school. So that happened. I was like, okay, another green light. Great. Really liking these people. And then two, the day before we officially started, or maybe the day we officially started, I don't remember, we had like an orientation thing, right? And it was like, when grades come out, let me back up. So in law school, you have all your grades are determined by a single final. There's no homework. There's no anything. It was kind of how I wanted to be in high school. Then I got what I wanted and I was like, oh, this is actually kind of scary because that's it. You did one day, one final, that's your whole grade, doesn't matter. And so a lot of people in that community are, one of my good friends had described it as kind of being like a racehorse on a track. They're bred and focused and they run really fast in their lane. You take them out to be like workhorse, that's not what they do, but they're really good at that. And so their identities are wrapped up into that. And I was like, okay, yeah, everyone here's an academic performer, sure. But this 0-day kind of orientation was like, when you get grades, if you are in the middle of the pack, do not kill yourself. here is the suicide hotline. Here are the people you need just to talk to, just in case. Do not kill yourself. Really, don't kill yourself. And I was like, it's not that serious. Like, my God. And, I was coming at this as a 30-year-old who'd been in the military versus, some of these people who were like, I was an Ivy League student and I went to private school and I had tutors, and my entire life, period, my self-worth is grades.
Yes.
So it was an interesting, that's kind of a weird start. And our first class, 8 a.m., not a morning person, Professor Rakoff, who taught Justice Elena Kagan. He was a lifelong Harvard Law professor, just recently retired, brilliant guy, hard to read. Like, when he's talking, you're like, I don't know if this guy likes me or if he's challenging me or if he agrees with me. So hard to get a beat on him. And he asks a question, the cold call, notorious among law students. So where basically a professor just looks out across your entire section, ours was 80 people, and goes, you tell me about a thing in the case. Give me your legal opinion in front of everybody right now. And the first person he calls, this guy, Michael Mitchell. And at the time, I did not know who Michael Mitchell was. Now, it turns out Michael Mitchell was a JD PhD and a lovely human being. Really like the guy, admire him a lot. But very academic. I didn't know anything about this dude, never met him before. And Professor Rakoff asks him a question, first cold call, and this guy talks like a 19th century judge writes. And he goes, accepting a few axioms, A, B, and C, from those positions, one might postulate. And I was like, oh, I'm in college. Like, I have made a severe mistake. I'm going to be dead last here. I'm going to be an intellectual pariah. And oh my God, what have I done to myself? So I was freaking out. I was just play it cool, man. You've been through the fire before. You'll get through this one. And again, I'm a person I'm an extrovert to the core, so I need socialization to charge. So me and the other extroverts that night are at a bar. We're drinking, we're having fun. And I think it was my friend Sabrina kind of just abruptly says to our group, she goes, did anyone else think Michael Mitchell's cold call was intimidating as hell? And everyone's like, yeah, oh my God, that guy is a genius. And I was like, oof, I can still feel the existential sigh let out all these years later. So turns out not everybody speaks like a 19th century judge of rights. Not everyone's a JD PhD. And it took me quite some time to really wrestle with my first experience with imposter syndrome since, walking onto LBCC and thinking everyone was stone quoting Shakespeare or Plato or whatever. And I was like, but these people actually might be able to do that. And this is actually quite scary. And I wrestled with imposter syndrome for 2 solid years, which as was everybody else. But, at the time, no one was really getting into the grit of it. And so I really had to put everything I knew into practice. And even then, and again, this is credit to my peers, I came in solidly middle of the pack, which I'm very proud of because I didn't drop below. Harvard has its own grading system, not get into the weird letter structure, but I was a perfectly fine, occasionally good, and rarely exceptional student. I was happy with that. I was look, I made it. I'm cool. I'll get a job. I thought, okay, you got here strictly because you're a smart guy and that's it. And there once was a time I was in the Bay Area and I talked to the dean of admissions for Stanford. And I was just dropping by. I got rejected by Stanford. And I kind of had this nothing to lose moment at the end of our conversation. I was like, you're notorious for shooting down 4.0s from, Yale or whatever, who have 180s on the LSAT, perfect application. Why? Why do you do that? And she said something that was remarkable to me and really stuck with me. She goes, my job as the dean of admissions is to pick a well-balanced class such that the class learns more from each other than they do from the professor. That's my job. I don't want a bunch of racehorses because I'm that's all we have. I need life, right? And so it took me a bit to realize okay, I'm not the racehorse. I've never been that person, but I bring my own strengths to it. Right? I done a lot of weird things. I've had a lot of pivots. And so, come job hunting time, I felt really comfortable because I was like, wow, I have a resume that doesn't need to include my high school clubs. I have these strengths. And I see now why I was brought into this situation and how I fit into the ecosystem here. And so, I think that's true in a lot of places. Every team needs diversity. in not just like, the traditional sense of different cultural makeups and backgrounds, but the reason that is a strength and why that matters so much is because you need a diversity of thought. You need people to see a problem differently, a solution differently, a pathway differently. And, that's true as much in humanity as in nature. Like monoculture crops aren't great. Inbreeding is notoriously terrible. You get the Habsburgs, right? Like you need diversity from the DNA level up. And so I understood that in a different way when I was there. And that really helped me find my stride and get into it.
Did that help you get over imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I think that probably did 60% of the heavy lifting. The other 10% was the professors being like, I too have imposter syndrome. And like you can hear that, but at that point, like the intensity of imposter syndrome is so strong that like even having, a venerated law professor saying, I too have imposter syndrome only gets you about 10% of the way there. And I remember a woman I admire, great mentor as well. Her name's Jody Freeman. She's an environmental law professor. Shout out to her. She taught me how to be a great writer. And she was in my second year, was doing something to send off third year students. And I snuck into the auditorium and, it was like, hey, they have like Professor Week giving their kind of benediction to the class before you go out into the world. And she did something really interesting. She puts her cell phone number up on the whiteboard, and notoriously private person, Professor Freeman, puts her cell phone number up on the whiteboard. She goes, this is my cell phone number. Please don't save it, but text me what you're afraid of. Text me what you're afraid of. And, give the room a minute, 90 seconds, whatever. And then she just starts reading them out. No numbers, just, hey, here's what it is. Here's what it is. And it was just so damn consistent. It's like, I'm afraid I'm not good enough. I'm afraid I'm not good enough. I'm afraid I'm not going to be good at my job. I'm afraid I'm not going to get a job. I'm afraid they're going to find out I'm not good. I'm afraid they're going to find out I was a really good student, but not a good practitioner. And it was just, I'm afraid I'm not good enough in some form, shape, and it was just beautiful.
What a great exercise.
Oh, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. Huh. But I was like, wow, like it really freaking is everybody. And so, there's this kind of idea if everybody's guilty, nobody's guilty kind of thing, right? If everybody has imposter syndrome, then like you're just normal. And so that exercise really was like eye-opening in a way a lived experience only could be. Where it's like, it doesn't matter if you're the president of law review. It doesn't matter if you're a high school dropout. Like everybody thinks they're not enough. And so I think a lot of imposter syndrome really only functions when you're pushing yourself, right? Like if you're being the big fish in a smaller pond, if you're not trying, you feel comfortable often because you're like, oh, I have extra capacity. And you don't feel imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is actually, I think, a good signal that you're pushing yourself because you're like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do the equivalent of like the free solo up, Half Dome or El Capitan or whatever. I don't know if I can do it. And that's when you're actually growing if you don't know. If you know, you're not growing. And so I actually see imposter syndrome now as like a green light. I'm like, good. It means I'm unsure of myself. I'm putting myself out there. Because once I started seeing like how low the bar could be, I felt a lot better. But then I was like, okay, I also know I'm not going to learn standing off against some of these people. And like, I've also fought incredibly effective attorneys and been like, okay, yeah, I'm learning a lot. I've had incredibly wonderful mentors who have taught me a lot. I've been drowned in oceans of red lines where I was like, oh my God, okay, yeah, I got to learn how to be better. But the ability to take the feedback, the ability to doubt yourself and keep going, and the ability to know that you're not great at what you're doing, but you're getting there is scary. It's emotionally uncomfortable, but it's in the same way of like going to the intellectual gym, right? Like you don't run 800 feet and go, oh, I didn't break a sweat. This counts. Like you really see the gains when you're like, man, I just want this to end, when you're uncomfortable. And I think because humanity places so much intellect or value on intellect, it's much scarier to be uncomfortable based on your intellect than it is based on, like, say, running at the gym when you're by yourself. So it's a little scarier, but I think it's twice as worth it.
So what do you do now? You graduate, you get a job. Where do you land?
Yeah, so I was really lucky and really credit to a lifetime of mentors in this. I was picked as an honors attorney general or deputy attorney general at the California Department of Justice. So back when she was attorney general, Kamala Harris had created this thing called the honors program, where basically we will hire a limited number of attorneys that year from law school. So normally you have to have like 3 to 5 years, preferably on the 5-year side of experience before you can join the Department of Justice, because it's a litigation shop, right? Like you need to be pretty good at what you do because there's a winner takes all component to this. And so I got really lucky and I was one of those 8 and I got hired and I joined the section in which I was the summer intern, which is the land use and conservation section. Our section represents the land use agency. So the State Lands Commission, the California Parks, the California Coastal Commission, and most importantly for the work I do, the California Geologic Energy Management Division, which is a mouthful. We call it CalGEM, and they do oil and gas regulation. So any time you're extracting energy, not refining or anything like that, extracting energy, they're the regulator. So the bulk of my work has been representing them. And so, I don't obviously want to get too much into the matters I do, but, being a litigator has been really exciting because having this kind of comes full circle, like having scientific acumen really makes me comfortable with numbers. And so I don't have to flinch when I need to be engaged with the science or become smart quickly on something that's quantified rather than qualified. I once at a trial had to cross-examine 2 experts. One of them was a petroleum engineer. The other guy was actually a climate scientist. And so being able to be like, okay, what are you actually saying? And what does that actually mean without it being like, speaking some arcane language was incredibly helpful. And being able to have the comfort of knowing while first doing that and, live at a trial was also really nice. It felt like I was standing on a rock instead of just like being thrown into the ocean. So it's been really helpful there. Same thing, diversity of thought. We have lawyers from every background, and I think that's been incredibly helpful. It's wonderful. I have an incredible team. I've joked that if I could clone my boss and have her be my supervisor forever, I would. That's what I do now. And I also teach at Cal State Long Beach due to our relationship, which is another, not to shock you out on your own podcast, but you have also been instrumental in my growth and my comfort in all this.
You've been doing this now 6 years?
6 years, yeah.
6 years. Do you look ahead? Is more teaching? I mean, you're a great instructor. You've also been a great mentor to our students. You've definitely given back. What's on your future agenda?
So it all comes back down to that idea of like impact, right? Like maybe I'm being a little grim, but hey, we're environmentalists.
Goes with the territory.
Goes with the territory. I think frequently, probably once a day, about the carbon budget, right? And, grim silver lining of the completely unnecessary war in Iran is at least like there's economic signals that are shifting us towards more sustainable and cleaner energy and away from oil and gas. There's an upshot there, I guess. But I think about the carbon budget and what my role is in trying to fix that. Now, I will say for environmentalists out there, it is important not to think you're the chosen one, because if you do and you're like, oh my God, I am responsible. You didn't create climate change. You didn't pollute the environment for decades before you were probably born. And it is not your responsibility to clean up the problem alone. Like you are but one part and all you can do is do your best. And if you're not going to do your best, if you burden yourself with the moral weight of what happened. And I know this because I used to do that. I was like, oh my God, like I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. That's an unhealthy place to be because you're taking on the weight of the world. That's not fair to you. And that's not going to make you the best advocate you can. The cousin of that, and I think the healthy cousin is, what can I do in a fulfilling way that helps me move the needle in a way that's satisfactory to me? And so that's where I'm at as I think about the future of my career is, what impact can I have in a way that's like I can live with and be happy with and actually works for me, because I'm still doing my best to try to do my part, right? I don't have to be like the single person who solves climate change. No one on this planet could be. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'll start with teaching. Now, teaching surprised me, actually. I didn't think it was going to be as an emotional of an experience. So I remember, the first time I did it, I was terrified. I was like, oh my God, like, I don't know if I can speak for 3 straight like, oh, what do I talk about? Do I actually even know the things I know? So figure all that out. And that was the first 70% of the semester. And I was like, how do I write a midterm? Oh my God. But I figured out the nuts and bolts of it, and now I'm quite comfortable with that. But the emotional payout, as it were, at the end, when I'm like, oh my God, like I help students, like I help people think about how to be a better environmental advocate. And, I've now mentored some of my students, and I had students give me a Lego set of Eva and Wally because I told them when, the chips are down environmentally or you're feeling overwhelmed by despair, think about the little things that you were hopeful in life and keep those close, because that's the moment you build your, what I call your hope Legos, and you build your Lego fortress, and you think about all the things you're hopeful for. And they gave me a Wally made of Legos. And I was like, that is like, I was like, moved. I was like, getting the lump in my face. Like, how the rules? And so it is a incredibly fulfilling experience. And I actually found it to be probably more impactful than what I do as a lawyer. And what I do as a lawyer seems somewhat additive. Like I am one person on a team and I'm adding my weight to the team, and that's great. And collectively, we could have a multiplicative effort or a result for the environment by virtue of being where we are. And that's wonderful. But I'm still additive to that process versus in the teaching context. I feel by nature of having multiple students that are going to go on to pursue environmental careers, I feel multiplicative. And, so selfishly, even putting aside like the feeling of teaching, it's nice to be like, I have this impact. So yeah, I would like to continue teaching. The tricky part of all that is I also see kind of the reality of litigation now. And that at some point has raised questions within me, being quite candid. If I spend 5 years, say, right, arguing a case that may move the needle incrementally, but it moves it, and I could lose that and make bad law, maybe push the needle back or keep it frozen in place. Or I could win it and push it forward, and maybe it takes a go up on appeal. And if it goes up on appeal, that might be another 3 years. And we have an 8-year timeline, right? And I think about the skills I have. Is that the best 8 years of impact I can make in a way that's healthy and sustainable for me? And I don't know. And so there are times I have the question of what would the alternative be? And that's tricky for a number of reasons. The job market's terrible. 1. 2, I actually am quite happy with my job. And then 3, like pivots are interesting in that they take different shapes in different parts of your career, right? And so mid-career, it's interesting exploration, but I do admittedly keep that door open to think about if there's an opportunity where I feel like I could do a greater good in a way that works for me, I think I would have to take it, right? Because I'm still the same teenage idealist and romantic I was then, that I do feel the need to take these big swings and believe in things, even if I know now that I'm probably going to get the human mess of it once I'm involved in the soup of the whole thing. But I do want to pursue that impact factor. And so if, say, hey, you could be someone who helps have a role in creating carbon-free cement production or fusion energy or something that actually, regardless of political constraints, moves the needle dramatically, I wouldn't say no to that, frankly. And so there's this kind of ear to the ground stance I have right now, which is frustrating, I'm sure, because it puts me in this position of well, I think I'm going to continue doing things here, but I would hate to miss an opportunity to feel like ride a unicorn into the sunset romantically, where we solve climate change and hold hands and kumbaya. So yeah, that's the North Star I have. The magnetic north is my impact factor. Where that places me on the map, still Southern California, with a wistful kind of desire to see what else is out there.
So looking back at your path, what would you, knowing what you know now, tell your pre-military self? So that year between dropping out and joining the military, knowing what you know now, what would you tell that person?
Be kinder. I took risk, and I'm proud of it, and it paid out. I wouldn't change that. I fought hard to get where I'm at, and there was some exhaustion existentially that like came with that. And I feel like sometimes it's not the years, it's the miles, and I've like traveled quite a bit. I wouldn't change that. I feel like it took me maturity to understand that when you feel like you're on top of the world, be as kind as you can. Act as if you were at the bottom. When you feel at the bottom, stay acting kind even though you're hurt. I've always tried to be a nice person, and I think hopefully most of my friends in college would consider me that, but it would have cost me nothing to be kinder, and I think it would have been better for everyone I ever come across. And then very happy with my career now, so I don't think I'd have any like real fundamental changes. I think everyone can be kinder. I wish I had been myself. There's times I know when I thought I was Mr. Awesome and I probably came off as arrogant, and I shouldn't have. And there are times I've been hurt and I was probably snippy or dismissive or unwilling to like really meet people where they're at because I didn't have the capacity to travel there. And I wish I had been kinder in those moments.
So what advice would you give college students today, and not just in the environmental world, I mean, just across the board, people graduating high school, trying to figure it out? You mentioned the job market's not very good.
Okay, so I was actually talking with a friend through law school about this last night. If you're in college, I would say take daring risks, right? Apply to the programs you think you're not going to get into. Apply to the wild internships. Shoot for Congress. Shoot for, presidential management fellows. Well, maybe not right now, but like that idea of like really glitzy things. You'll get rejected plenty, but you'll get really good at interviewing. You'll get really good at writing personal statements. Those skills will carry with you, and eventually you'll get something. You'll get something. Roll with that. Be the best thing you can. Don't be like, oh, I'm being an intern or a fellow or whatever because I want to be something else. No, be like, I want to be at this internship. This is the end of the rails for this internship. So I'm going to be the best intern I can, and really just swing for it. Exhaust yourself. Like swing for it. Like if you get it, you'll feel good. You'll have a reason to celebrate. If you don't, you'll have a reason to celebrate. You'll be like, oh, I didn't get it, and go out with your friends. But swing for it, man. Like this is the time in your life where you don't have a mortgage, you probably don't have kids, like you don't have the things that like kind of naturally make people a little bit more conservative, not politically, but conservative in like the risk taking. You have youth doing the heavy lifting, like swing big and just see what happens. The reason you're probably not going to is because you're like, I'm not going to get it, right? It's not worth my time. It is worth your time. Even if you don't get it because you're practicing, and that's a life skill that you'll need for the rest of your life, you learn to stand up for yourself professionally. You're learning the advocacy. But more importantly, what if you do get it? And if you shoot enough times, you're going to get something. And then from that thing, you'll get more things. So like truly, that's what I would do. As I understand it, a lot of high schoolers are like, well, AI is actually pretty sophisticated right now. It is. It's not going away. It doesn't seem to be. What am I going to do professionally? I don't know. But you don't need to know that right now either. And the economy will change as you are in training. What you can do is make yourself smart, disciplined, and skillful. So do those things. If you're going to be a plumber, figure out how to actually get practice and do that meaningfully, like actually go for it. If you want to go to college, sometimes people say it's not worth it the way it was. I disagree with that. I think even if you don't get a job in your major, the intellectual rigor and actually like learning the discipline and the practices, as I mentioned earlier, that got me to where I am, also intrinsically valuable, even though you don't get to put it on a piece of paper in the same way you might a degree. Because what AI won't be able to do is, in a lot of ways, take the human out of the loop. Now, it might require someone to be like, hey, I'm the co-thinker with AI, right? Like I'm going to work with AI, and we're using AI in the labor force as much as any other person. Make yourself the good co-thinker. Like you still have a human brain. The value of that is not diminishing regardless of how good AI gets. So refine your judgment. And that gets back to, it ain't going to be coming from social media. It ain't going to be coming from self-doubt. And it ain't going to be coming from the existential dread and anxiety that social media formats.
Stephen, thank you so much. That was all great advice. And thanks for sharing your story. Thank you so much for listening to Path Found. If anything we talked about today connected with you or gave you a new perspective, we'd love it if you subscribed, left a review, or shared the episode with someone you care about. You can also find us on Instagram at Path Found Podcast. To explore more stories, resources, and ways to get involved, visit KeystoneNetwork.org. This podcast is just one part of the journey. At Keystone Network, we're helping young people and anyone figuring it out as they go build meaningful futures one step at a time. A huge thank you to my podcast editor, David Strutt. You can find him on LinkedIn for helping bring these stories to life, and to Elizabeth Miner at Silvermine Creative for the beautiful artwork and web design. And if you're on your own path, navigating the unknown, making a pivot, or simply figuring it out as you go, just know you're not alone. The route may not be linear, but there's always a way forward. I'm Monica Argandonia, and I'll see you next time on Path Found.